During World War II, female Allied spies risked everything to infiltrate Nazi-occupied territories, gathering vital intelligence. Once captured, many were subjected to violent torture and brutal interrogation tactics. These women faced unimaginable physical and psychological torment, yet their courage and determination to resist exposure helped shape the course of the war, highlighting the extreme risks they endured for the Allied cause. In today's video, we will learn the tragic fates of many Allied female spies who served deep behind enemy lines in Nazi-occupied Europe. These women risked imprisonment, torture, and almost certain death if captured. During World War II, Allied espionage efforts in Europe played a vital role in undermining Axis powers and their hold on their occupied territories. The intelligence networks of nations like Britain, the Soviet Union, and France coordinated complex operations to gather information, disrupt enemy activities, and support wider resistance movements. Women emerged as indispensable agents in this clandestine war, with many serving undercover on the front lines, where they were at constant risk of capture and torture at the hands of the feared Gestapo, or SS. Organizations such as Britain's Special Operations Executive, SOE, and the many Soviet partisan groups actively recruited women for their linguistic skills, adaptability, and ability to blend into occupied territories. Female operatives worked as couriers, radio operators, and saboteurs, working alongside resistance groups and helping them to maintain contact with regular Allied forces. Elizaveta Ivanovna Chakina was born in 1918 in the Tver Oblast. She fully embraced the ideals of Soviet socialism, joining the All-Union Communist Party in 1939. When Germany first invaded the Soviet Union in June of 1941, Chakina willingly joined the Soviet partisans, where she was tasked with gathering intelligence and carrying out reconnaissance missions. Acting as a reconnaissance officer, Chakina infiltrated German-occupied territories to gather vital information about enemy positions and movements, which were then reported back to the army. In November 1941, she was conducting a mission in the small village of Pino, where she was betrayed to the German authorities by a local kulak, a traditional enemy of the Bolsheviks. She was swiftly captured by the Nazis, who suspected her of working with partisans. Chakina underwent brutal interrogation and torture at the hands of her Nazi captors, who wished to force her into revealing information about her comrades, their plans, and their location. Despite constant torture, she refused to betray the Soviet resistance. Her silence frustrated her captors and, realizing they would never get any information from her, she was executed by firing squad on the 23rd of November, 1941. In 1942, Chakina was posthumously awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest honor for bravery. Monuments were erected to her memory, and her story became a symbol of defiance and sacrifice. Another posthumous recipient of the Hero of the Soviet Union was Zoya Konstantinskaya, a young Soviet partisan who also received the Order of Lenin. Born in Tambov Oblast, she joined the Komsomol as a teenager and, after the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, volunteered for partisan service. She conducted sabotage and espionage, aiming to disrupt Nazi operations in the area. In November 1941, Zoya and her partisan group were ordered to destroy infrastructure and resources used by the Germans in the Moscow region. During a mission in the village of Petroshevo, Zoya set fire to a stable housing German troops and horses. Despite fighting for Russia, a local villager betrayed her to the Nazis, and she was soon captured. Over the course of 2 days, the Nazis subjected Zoya to horrific torture, hoping that she would divulge vital information about her partisan unit. She endured whippings, beatings, and bodily mutilation, but still refused to divulge any information about her and her unit's activities. Her execution was made into a public spectacle, with Zoya wearing a sign declaring her a house burner. Despite her suffering, she defied her captors, reportedly declaring, "You hang me now, but I'm not alone." There are 200 million of us. You can't hang us all. They will avenge me." On the 29th of November, 1941, Zoya was publicly executed by hanging in the village of Petroshevo, Russia. Before her death, she urged the local villagers to resist the Nazi occupation, leaving an indelible mark on those who witnessed her bravery. Zoya's story became a cornerstone of Soviet propaganda, inspiring countless others to resist fascism. Soldiers carried pictures of her in their pockets, named their tanks after her, and to this day, there are streets and schools named after her, honoring her as a martyr for the Soviet Union. In 2010, there were calls to have her declared a saint by the Russian Orthodox Church. Violette Zabo was a British-French spy born in Paris. She joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service but had to return to London after discovering she was pregnant. Eventually, she was approached to work for the Special Operations Executive, SOE, an arm of the military dedicated to espionage, sabotage, and supporting European resistance movements. After the success in her first mission, Zabo was assigned her second, which would also end up being her last. Tasked with coordinating with local resistance groups immediately following the Allied invasion, she operated near Limoges, France. On the 10th of June, 1944, she and a local resistance member were intercepted by a German roadblock. Zabo gave resistance, firing on the Germans, allowing the resistance member to escape. She was eventually captured. Held captive in Fresnes prison, Paris, Zabo suffered a terrible ordeal of endless torture and interrogation. Despite the physical and psychological abuse, she refused to reveal any information about her mission or her fellow agents. She was eventually transferred to the infamous Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany, where she endured horrific conditions amongst the thousands of other inmates. In early 1945, as the war in Europe was nearing its end, the 23-year-old Violette Zabo was executed by the Nazis, with witnesses reporting that she was shot alongside two other female SOE agents. She was posthumously awarded the George Cross, a medal equal in stature to the Victoria Cross, which is the highest award for military valor. She is commemorated in multiple plaques and monuments, as well as the Violette Zabo GC Museum. Noor Inayat Khan was a British Indian spy with an interesting beginning. Born in Moscow, her father was an Indian Sufi mystic, and her great-great-grandfather was Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, once a great enemy of the British. Having moved to France when Noor was young, the family fled to Britain following the defeat in the Battle of France. She joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force and was eventually deployed to work as a wireless operator in France under the codename Madeline. She operated in Paris, transmitting vital intelligence to London. Her mission was a dangerous one, as the average undercover wireless operator in France was expected to last no longer than 6 weeks. Despite repeated warnings of compromised networks, Noor remained in France to continue her critical work. In October 1943, she was betrayed by a French collaborator and captured by the Gestapo. She was interrogated for months, where she endured endless torture, but managed to not reveal to them any information, something which her superiors had been concerned about. Due to her 2 failed escape attempts, she was classified a highly dangerous prisoner and was kept shackled and in solitary confinement. On September 13, 1944, Noor was executed at Dachau concentration camp. Witnesses to her death reported her final word to be liberty. She was posthumously awarded the George Cross and the Croix de Guerre. Odette Sansom was another French-born British spy and member of the SOE during World War II. Born in France, she was living in Britain at the outbreak of World War II. She was approached to join the SOE in 1942 and arrived in Cannes in October of the same year under the codename Lise. She and her team were eventually hunted down by infamous German secret policeman Hugo Bleicher, who approached them pretending to be an anti-Nazi German soldier. Sansom and her commanding officer were both soon arrested. The Nazis subjected her to violent interrogation on 14 separate occasions, but she steadfastly refused to divulge any information about her network or fellow agents, instead only giving a carefully planned false story. The Gestapo condemned her to death on 2 counts, with her responding, "Then you will have to make up your mind on what count I am to be executed, because I can only die once." Just like many other female operatives, she was sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. She stayed in a cell near the punishment chamber where she would have to listen to other women being beaten and tortured. She was kept on a very limited diet of little more than watery soup, a small piece of bread, and tea or coffee. After enduring months of physical and psychological torment, she was finally liberated in April of 1945. Predicting the Allies' coming victory, a Ravensbrück commandant took her to a nearby American base, hoping he could use her to barter for his own freedom. Sansom would later testify against him in post-war war crimes trials. Though severely weakened by her ordeal, Odette survived the war and returned to Britain. In recognition of her courage, Odette was awarded the George Cross and the Legion d'Honneur by the French government, making her the most highly decorated spy of the war. Odette Sansom lived to the age of 82, dying in 1995 in Surrey. Germaine Tillan was a French ethnographer and a member of the French resistance during World War II. Born in 1907, Tillan worked in French Algeria before the war. When Nazi Germany invaded France, she immediately became involved in the resistance, later stating of the Marshal Petain's armistice with Germany, "When I heard Petain's speech, I vomited." She helped establish one of the first resistance networks in German-occupied France. After over 2 years of fighting for the resistance, Tillan was arrested by the Gestapo after being betrayed by a fellow resistance member, a priest, who had joined to gather information for the Nazis. In 1943, she was sent to the notorious Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany, a camp primarily for women. Her mother was also arrested and deported, eventually falling victim to the gas chambers. During her time there, Tillan endured brutal conditions, including forced labor, starvation, and isolation. Despite the horrific and degrading treatment, she maintained her resilience and continued to support fellow prisoners, and even produced an opera based on life in the camp. Tillan kept detailed records of her experiences within Ravensbrück and observed the camp's inner workings, which later contributed to her writings on the camp's atrocities. Tillan survived the war and returned to France in 1945. After the war, she became a prominent figure in French intellectual life, continuing her work as a historian and contributing to post-war reparations for concentration camp survivors. Female spies during World War II played a crucial role in the intelligence networks of both the Allies and Axis powers. Many of these incredible women operated undercover in Nazi-occupied territories, often working as couriers, radio operators, or secret agents. Their missions were always dangerous, requiring them to operate in enemy-held territories, gathering vital information and sabotaging Nazi operations, acts which would almost certainly result in a death sentence if captured. They exposed themselves to tremendous risk, knowing that capture could lead not only to death, but to immense torture or imprisonment in the concentration camps. The violence they faced upon capture was almost always brutal. The Nazis employed extreme interrogation techniques, including physical torture, psychological manipulation, and starvation, in an effort to extract information or force confessions. Those who refused to talk were usually executed. Despite this, many female spies remained resolute, refusing to reveal crucial details that could jeopardize the Allied war effort or the lives of their fellow resistance fighters. In the end, many of these women met tragic fates. Some were executed in cold blood, while others died in squalid concentration camps or in brutal Gestapo prisons. Their sacrifices, though often forgotten, were integral to the success of Allied espionage, and their courage remains a testament to the incredible risks they took to support the war effort and the defeat of Nazi Germany. These 6 women are only a tiny fraction of all those who participated in the fight against the Axis powers. Thousands fought directly with the resistance, while millions more worked in factories producing weapons and ammunition. manning anti-aircraft batteries, or worked with the Red Cross and in military hospitals. Though often overlooked in popular film and television, women from all the Allied nations played a vital role in the Allies' eventual victory.